Okay, hi there, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today, Built, Trusted, Chosen. If you'd like to just introduce yourself real quick, we'll unpack it further, but just tell people who you are and where you're from and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Dan Bamper. I live in Oklahoma City, here in the US, and I am a fractional CFO for the contractors and tradesmen space. My main objective is kind of twofold. The first is, help generate wealth through business, so that way we can kind of break out of generational poverty, anything that's held us back, because I really believe that when you make more money, it's easier to change the world. And the second thing is I want to help turn you into take a seven-figure contractor and turn them into an eight-figure contractor. So that way, I think it's one of the easiest ways to accomplish that mission.
Yeah, brilliant. And what would you say are the biggest things holding trades and construction businesses back? Would you say, do you find some common traits that keep people limited in their capacity?
I do. I've worked with probably about 15 or 20 contractors here in Oklahoma City so far. And there's usually three pillars that I'm seeing that they've got to have in place to make sure they work. And the first one, if they've got to make sure that they're taking the right jobs. And that seems really simple and kind of a duh moment, but usually it gets to the point where my clients are taking almost every job that comes their way, whether they're in HVAC, electricians, anything just to get some money in the door and get business running. And what they're doing is, especially on the bigger commercial projects, is they're trying to bid themselves so low that they're pricing for scarcity and competition, that they're forgetting to factor in their margins. They're forgetting to factor in profit and overhead. And then as they're working the jobs, they're not really keeping track of costs real time as they're starting to go through. So they can say, "Oh, I should be making $10,000 from this job," but it's very rare that they actually take that last minute to come through and sit down and do the review afterwards to bridge that gap.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense. So you would say that the scarcity, I suppose, holds people back to a large degree. Scarcity in terms of they feel as though there's not enough ideal projects, so they take on projects outside what's really a great fit for them, and potentially the
that's it.
scarcity in terms of bidding too low and not leaving enough margin. So sometimes things might change and blow out, and then all of a sudden you've eroded all of your profit. Is that fair to say?
It is. And so kind of on the job side of things, not only is it, taking any job that comes their way, even if it's not the one that's best fit for what they do, they are not they may not be pricing it correctly because they're thinking about trying to underbid their competitors.
Yeah.
But also I see that that they also don't quite position what they bring to the table as a really valuable asset. Um, and what I mean when
Yeah.
I say that is, you people call you because they have a problem, right? They're
Mm.
calling because, hey, it's the middle of winter, my furnace shut off, or um, it's I had a pipe burst. I need you to come fix this. And
Mm.
when people say they have a problem, not only is it the actual problem itself, it's all of the baggage that comes around it. And so, like, we're coming up on the holiday season here or we're in the middle of the holiday season here in the States. And so, if this time of year, if you've got a pipe that bursts, your clients call you up and they're like, "Oh no, my pipe burst. My mother's going to be here next week and she's going to do nothing but judge what the house looks like
Mm.
because I had someone come in and fix something, or even worse, I'm going to have to cancel and then be the talk of the family, where it's just another example of a disappointment." But there's a lot of things that contractors can do that are very small, very subtle, but really powerful when it comes to the client side of things. Even if it's just something super simple like a plumber saying, "Hey, you know what? I've got a restoration guy that I can call for you. He should be able to fit you in real quick, help dry out a lot of the damage. We can stop the mold from coming in and set this up." So now when that plumber's talking to that client, they're not just fixing their busted pipe, they're also setting the stage for, yeah, let me leverage my network and make this experience so much cleaner for you in the long run.
Yeah, I love that idea of having a strong network and referring work onto other people in similar
Yeah,
fields, and they will likely refer back to you because people tend to do that and building relationships. Do you see that happening enough in the clientele that you're working with, or is that sort of a new concept to people you speak to?
It's more, it's not necessarily a foreign piece. Like there's some really natural referrals that happen. But even more than just generating the referral and building the relationship, you're bringing the value of a recommendation to a client. And you can say,
Mm,
look, I know there's other problems that comes with this immediate problem, like your pipe bursting, and
mm.
I have that solution for you too. It doesn't take you but 5 minutes to call up your buddy that runs the restoration company or a trusted referral partner that you've worked with before to go, hey, I had this client pipe busted, pipe's been fixed. Can you guys get in here this week to handle it? Usually the office manager is a lot more likely to say, yeah, let me see what I can do when it's
Yeah,
kind of that trusted person. So you're bringing a whole lot of value that comes in. And that's one of the other
yeah,
big pieces that gets missed is you're not just solving today's problem, you're solving tomorrow's problem too.
yeah. I love it. Bringing value by solving problems. I heard it once said. I wish I could remember who said it, but if you want to get more income, just create bigger, solve bigger problems. So
Yeah.
the just solving problems is the way to get rich, if that's the way you want to look at it. Solving people, finding out what people need, and delivering on those needs, and it's a pretty foolproof way of success. But then there's also obviously the numbers and the metrics, which people need to understand as well, and that's a big part of what you do, isn't it?
It is. And that's kind of pillar number two that I say is kind of like the big silent killer for a lot of trades is they don't know their numbers. And, you know, part of that is because when you go to trade school, you don't learn accounting. They
Mm,
don't teach you the business side. They make you really great at being a plumber, HVAC tech, electrician, even like restoration training, things along those and certifications. They teach you how to do the skills and give you the
mm,
tools you need to get out there and do the work. And
yeah,
so when you step into the business side of things, that it introduces a whole new side of complexity to talk about. And it's not just how much money am I making and how much money am I spending. It's about how many people are reaching out to me. How well are my marketing systems working? How well are my sales systems working? Are my clients happy by the time they're done? How do I know? Are they likely to refer me elsewhere? And
yeah,
I say there's kind of five main pillars inside of a good business: marketing, sales, client delivery, operations, and then your finance and data. And as
yeah.
you kind of cross that seven-figure threshold, it becomes a new beast of the finance and data side to help you go from that 7 to 8 figure level.
Yeah. So with those I guess key pillars of the business, which
Hmm.
ones do you feel as though the construction or the trades businesses fall down on the most, would you say?
That's a great question. And honestly, I think it's about the last one, the team. Because when you've hit that 7 figure level, or even as you're growing up to it, the biggest thing that I see is contractors say, well, I know how to run a truck, flying solo, running my own business for so long. I'll just get a second truck and we'll just make two of us. And
Yeah.
then that two of us becomes three and four. And there becomes a threshold where that's not the most profitable way to operate anymore. You can't
Mm,
have your techs just come in and, whoever's available takes the call, schedules in the next job and goes.
yeah.
It You've got to have kind of like a centralized hub and a new system in place and change the way you operate. But that comes from putting a great team in place, building great support systems, making sure that your teams know the numbers they need to be running on to be successful and meet your expectations, and make sure that they represent you the way you want to be represented.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of businesses, founder-led businesses, uh, falling down in these areas. I certainly struggled a lot starting my own business. I mean, I had a limited skill set, and it's what I see in a lot of new businesses in the trades construction field. So typically for them, and it reflects kind of the same way in which I started business. So you start with a great skill set. So you learned as a
Yes.
tradie, we call them in Australia, but you start with your skill set and you learn as an apprentice, and then you're fully qualified, and then you work your way up to some form of management role up the chain, and eventually start your own business. And all the
Yeah.
only education you've got in running a business is what you've observed at every different level that you've worked your way through. but you
Yeah.
might not necessarily have ever been in accounts, for example. So you don't know how to do a proposal or an invoice, and how to do the billing, and how to even figure these things out. So
Yeah.
that's
And
the part of the key learning. And how much of the understanding in terms of the finance does the founder need to understand, and how much do they just lean upon their accountant, for example, or the people that they bring into their world for those sort of key numbers?
that's a great example. That's a great one because it varies wildly. I have seen some founders where they're really great about keeping track of their dollars and cents. And they want to make sure that they come in and have somebody just take that off their plate for them. And usually, a bookkeeper can do that pretty well for them. I've also had some that come in and go, I don't know. I make like one of my very first clients I work with was an HVAC contractor here in the city. And during our first consultation, he said, I don't know, I'm making somewhere between $2 and $4 million.
Wow, that's big.
That,
It's a lot of
right?
difference.
And so
Amazing.
yeah, and his stuff was, and like his books were a wreck. But
Yeah,
by the time I got in there and got everything cleaned up, I said, I don't mean to be the guy that brings you the bad news, but you're not making between $2 and $4 million. You're making probably closer to 1.5.
yeah,
And he said, oh, well, what's my profit
yeah,
margin look like? You lost a little bit of money this year. That's probably why things feel really tight. And so we dug deep in and kind of started looking at those three big pillars, our jobs, our finances, and our team. And we
yeah.
found out that he didn't have the great financial foundation system in place. So we built a great simple bookkeeping system for him to use, included some job costing work, and then we gave him a profitable job calculator to make sure he can have a consistently great estimate for his HVAC business.
Mm,
He did a lot of construction work, so there wasn't a lot of low cost estimation software that was worth anything. So we just built one from scratch for him,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
got his team lined up and said, "Great, you're you're the residential guy. You're helping the HVAC owner on the commercial side. Hey, residential guy, you're going out and your goal is to close 40% of the jobs that come into you, and you've got 10 estimates scheduled this week to go out. If you can close 4, you're in great shape. Close
yeah,
6, we'll throw an extra little bonus your way to start." um,
yeah,
and when we started turning some specific action targets for the team, like between those three simple things, he hit that 2 million mark, no problem.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
just even setting goals and having vision and direction will make a big difference, even if you don't precisely hit. Yeah, if you're kind of extending yourself to really grow, you may not hit the goal, but at least you're moving toward that goal, and everyone's on the same page. Um,
that's it.
Do you feel as
Um,
though when you're helping people set their goals, do you feel as though they often will reach them, or how close do they sort of get? How far are people pushing themselves in these industries?
I found if they're really ready to sit down and make it happen and own their results, I've seen incredible things happen. My one of my other early clients was a restoration contractor, and he said, I want to hit 1 million this year. It's like, okay, your average job value came back at 1,500, uh, and we started kind of running through the math, working backwards from you know here's what you want to make, here's what your average job value is, here's how many jobs you're going to need. And what that means over the span of every week is you're going to need to close 7 jobs a week. Can you do at $1,500? Can you do it?
Yeah,
And so this guy was like, watch me. And so he started knocking it out. He started getting 7 pretty consistently, and then he pushed it to 10. And then
yeah,
about 3 months later, he was pushing it to 13 or 14. And
yeah.
so he smashed his goal out of the water because he was consistently aiming for those numbers and just went
Mm,
for that small incremental progress quarter over quarter.
yeah. That's really cool. I was talking to a guy just yesterday at a networking event who runs a business. He does swimming pools and so on. But what part of his
Hmm.
business is the inspections for safety compliance here in Australia. They need to
Yeah.
be checked frequently, and so what he found, having crunched his numbers, was that was the highly profitable part of the business, and the reason being it's recurring. So once you get a client, you've got them for forever, unless you make a mistake or something. But
Yeah.
as long as you're providing a great service, they'll just be recurring every 12 months, I believe it is. So yeah, that's whilst it's a lower dollar value sale at the in the short term, it takes very little time, and it's it's predictable income. So
Yeah.
how do you go about helping the clientele that you work with discovering which are the most profitable aspects of business and which potentially are causing more harm than good?
That's a great question, and I'm going to fall back to another example on this one. So when a lot of my clients come to me, they'll come in and say, "Well, here's kind of what my profit and loss looks like so far this year. Here's my balance sheet. Here's my cash flow summaries." And I go through and I say, "Great, your numbers are kind of here, but in order to get a better understanding, tell me about the types of jobs you do." Um, and so an electrician I worked with recently said, "Hey, I'm coming in at about 1.7, 1.8 million a year. Margins were coming in about 15% net
Mm.
profit by the end of the day." And I said, "Okay, are you more residential or construction?" He goes, "Oh, I'm mostly construction." I said, "What kind of percentage are you looking at?" "Oh, I don't know."
Yeah,
And all of a sudden that's the kind of ownership of numbers that really helps distinguish some of your top performing contractors and most profitable contractors from the ones who aren't.
yeah,
And it's really important to look at what I call your revenue mix, because that helps you set the target to see where you need to be in terms of industry. Um, with a construction job, you're usually going to see a much higher materials cost because you've got to build everything in from scratch. Whereas a home service type model, you're going to have a lot of higher labor costs, maybe some increased overhead costs, depending on kind of what your insurance looks like for the number of trucks you're running, things along those lines. Um, and so when we sat down and looked at it, I was like, "Hey, you've got about an 80-20 mix right now between your construction and residential. And just kind of ran a simple model, then said, "Hey, if we tweak this to, a 70-30, you can increase your profit margins by about 5 or 6% without having to take on, a whole nother slog of work, adding in more crews, um, and making it work from there." And
yeah,
that balance was, and when he kind of got that clarity of, "Oh, I just need to make a small tweak,"
yeah,
we then sat down and said, "Okay, well, this is what your lead cost is. Here's what you're going to need to adjust in your advertising budget. And so you're going to see a little bit of an increase in your marketing budget, but you're going to see a huge return on the profitability side."
yeah. That's
And it,
that's brilliant. Yeah, yeah. The and so once you know what the key areas of business are most profitable and beneficial for your business, you can market to that more effectively. So I always tell our clientele, if you market to your very best ideal type of work, you'll get other
yes,
work by accident anyway, and because you
yes,
know in the industry and all that kind of stuff, and other things flow on. But just nail that precise, that very best type of work, and the other things flow from there. So it's
there
really
is
good
this.
when people have that clarity.
Agreed. And some, I always say, here's one thing to round out. Don't just market to your best client, repel your worst ones.
Yeah,
And so
that's
if
an
you've got
interesting. Yeah.
but it's super simple then, because if it turns into, uh, well, usually if people are calling up and they're getting 7, 8, 9, 10 quotes and they're price shopping, they're
Mm,
probably not going to be your ideal client, because not only are they going to want the lowest price, they're going to try to continue to nickel and dime you. If you
mm.
don't get payment on site, you may not get paid.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's so
so
true.
it's
Yeah.
not just important to market to, who you really want to work with. It's also important to repel the people you don't.
Yeah. That's really true. I've got a client who was in that similar scenario. Once they started figuring out what was causing the most grief in their business, really, they were just feeling as though they were always supporting the clientele and explaining to them what they're doing, and just spending a whole lot of time. But they realized it was only a certain type of person that was causing those problems. The the B2B, the business to business, was great because they understood precisely what it was that they're delivering, and they haven't got a handhold, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so for them, they just realized, hey, we're just going to market to businesses, and the residential will come in anyway. But just halve their support and all that additional work you've got to do that sometimes gets forgotten, doesn't get measured accurately when you're only looking at certain key aspects of business, like the numbers, but you're not
Right.
considering the time investment. And that's why I like your approach, which is really quite holistic. It gives you a more complete picture that, there's things that we all miss as businesses because we're so close to our own stuff and we're in it daily, getting our hands dirty, doing the work. And it's not until someone has an external perspective or brings you into a system that creates an external perspective that real change can occur.
Yeah. And it's the other part of that is because business owners, we're really attached to our businesses emotionally. And that's because we've spent years putting them in place. We've kind of built them up there. We treat them like our babies. And it's really hard to step back and let go sometimes and let them continue to grow and thrive on their own. Um, because your role shifts a lot from getting out there and doing the work to supporting the people doing the work and making sure they're doing it according to your standards.
Yeah. Well, that's such a key thing for building trust these days. I always say that it feels as though trust is being eroded in every industry. And I think part of that is due to just the overwhelming amount of information out there. I mean, we had the online and social media, which was just an overwhelm of information. But these days, with AI producing content at massive scale, and we don't even know if a human's even read it or written it, or the videos, the videos are looking so realistic. There's just an overwhelm of information. So there's an erosion of trust. So getting some of these key foundations in place that you can build a reputation and a solid foundation for trust so that word of mouth referrals, all of these things can kick into gear. That's really where it's at, I believe, in businesses.
Yeah. And to kind of follow up on that, the one thing I've seen a lot is people don't want fancy and complex. They don't want overly overly produced, overly done. They're not just looking for trust. They're looking for authenticity, and that's one of the things that can really guide someone there. If you're watching a video, it's pretty obvious to see if they're reading a script, not or don't genuinely believe in what they're doing, or even to the point where, like you said earlier, you don't know if it's a real person.
Yeah, I know. You're quite right. The
And
authenticity piece, it's so huge. And even like working with a client recently, so they're a cladding company and they've got lots of beautiful projects because cladding is a aesthetic thing. But
yeah,
that was great. But there's a lot of their work is in the recladding, so showing the before and after. So they were less likely that they were reluctant to show some of the great before and after shots, but it's so powerful because it shows what it once was. Because their photos aren't that great for the before, they were
right.
a little bit thinking it would mess up their websites, but it's just so powerful, that authentic thing. Here's what it was, here what it is now. People can relate to it and say, hey, that's kind of like what I want. And because the photos weren't always professional, they were just people on the job site sometimes just going bang and bang. I think that content is just fine. It doesn't need to be a professional photograph all the time. Depends on the nature of what you're doing, but just the authenticity of a real photograph these days.
Yeah. And like, the other thing about it is I love it when something's kind of ugly. I don't know why, but you can tell when somebody launched it ugly, and there's this real appreciation and like somebody really put some time into this. And yeah, it might look like something from the early 2000s at geocities.com or whatever, but you can tell that it's something that somebody made, and that usually is one of the first things that I'll see, and it's like, hey, this is a trust. If you try to look too polished, I
Yeah.
always go, what are you hiding?
Yeah, yeah, that's a big thing these days. Obviously, with everything going on in the world, AI. It's so super exciting, but also terrifying where it lands us all. But I think obviously trades businesses are safe to some degree. I mean, there'll be robots one day swinging a hammer, no doubt, but right now they're probably the most safe career paths to take.
And
Um,
one of the highest in demand,
yeah,
especially
we've
here in
got
the States.
we've got issues here as well with getting team on board for trade businesses. Simply, well, part of the cause was governments chose to do major projects to improve the economy and that sort of stuff. It always helps to do infrastructure led projects, which is great, but it took all the workforce out of smaller businesses. So, all the smaller businesses in the field and construction finding it incredibly difficult to get team members on board. So that's the unintended consequences. They no doubt had good intentions, but sometimes there's challenges in business that you can't foresee. Powers outside your control. I mean, we went through the building materials costs that put a lot of businesses out of business here in Australia. I mean, building a house and then you've done a fixed cost proposal quote, and then all of a sudden the costs are blowing you out and you're running at a loss. So we saw a
Yeah.
number of businesses go out of business as a consequence of not having their numbers right and the safeguards in place. That's why it's so important to have people in your corner like you are, helping with those sorts of things, getting everything safeguarded in place so you can make good
Always.
decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, and making sure you have like a, great change order process in place and even guidance on the right type of language to include, hey, this type of change is what triggers the change order and when we may bill you because our costs have drastically increased outside of what we predicted.
Yeah. And so the next piece we sort of go through a model. It feels it's a little bit fluid, but we won't go through the built, trusted, chosen piece. The chosen
Yeah.
piece in your world, it's about choosing the right type of work and even the positioning. You mentioned something earlier about positioning. How do you think a founder of one of these trade based businesses should go about finding out how they should position themselves?
That's a great that's a great point. So usually I say, what is the thing that, what's your secret sauce? I think is the way to say it. Kind of going back to that authenticity thing we talked about, there's certain standards of how you do things. And there are some of those are industry, but a lot of those are personal. And I
Yeah.
think really, really asking people to lean into those personal standards is something that's huge.
Mm.
So, an example that I'm going to give, I helped my restoration client recently with a sales training, and it was because he said, "I don't understand why, if it's covered under insurance, it's people say go ahead. It's really not a problem." He said, but usually if it ends up being something that's not covered, it's something that's going to turn into a mess in a year and cost twice as much to do. And it's really dangerous to do a DIY job on this because you don't have the instrumental data to go in and measure moisture. You don't have the hydrometers. You don't have the right types of fans, and you don't have a way to make sure mold's not going to come back after the pipe burst inside of a wall, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so we leaned into that, and I said, You understand all of this to your clients." Um,
Mm.
and he said, "No, I don't think they do." So we sat down and we actually built out like an on-site immediate estimate form where they got to go through and say, "Well, here's kind of the scope of the problem. Here's three potential scenarios, best, likely, worst case scenarios, and map out here's what your relative ranges on your estimates can be." Um, but then it's a matter of, if we come in and fix it, here's how we know it's fixed, and this is why we trust what we do. And I said, lean into the data driven, science backed explanations that you've really taken the moisture out of that sheetrock, or you've remediated
Mm.
everything to standards. Um, and then throw a risk reversal on top of it. Do you have one of those? Do you make it so where customers don't have to worry about there being an issue down the road? He goes, yeah, actually, you know, If we come in and dry something out and say it's at standard, we have a 2-year guarantee that it's not going to get molded.
Mm.
Oh, are you leaning into that? No.
Yeah.
And so we kind of did a full overhaul in a sales process, and he was all about data driven standards, 2-year no mold guarantee. It's like, come on, man, this is great stuff here. That's how you
Mm.
can position yourself, is by showing like what standards you work towards. And that can even be something simple with like a painter, for example. I recently worked through where all they had to do on their sales team, because people were giving them the objection that I don't know, how do I know I can trust your crews if they're not direct labor? You're subcontracting out, really
Right.
common model in the paint industry.
Mm.
But I said, well, do you background check your crews? Well, yeah. Are you telling people you background check your crews even when they ask you? No. Tell them. Showcase
Yeah.
the things you do, because you know that you have to do these things the right way already and what your standard looks like. So tell people what your standards are. Tell people
Mm.
what you're working towards. Position yourself as the expert that can be trusted, known, liked, and be the one that they're going to choose every single time.
Yeah. No, I love it. There's almost hidden gold in different aspects of your business that you don't realize can be great marketing tools once they're uncovered. So in we work with some slightly larger or really large companies in some instances, and you can kind of tell different departments don't speak to each other, and
Yes.
it's difficult because there's so much information that would be worthwhile using as marketing positioning of a brand, but no one just know, the marketing team doesn't know about it. So in a
Yeah.
smaller business, hopefully there's better relationships amongst the team to do that. But I think usually you need an external set of eyes to uncover it, because as I said before, I think you're so close to your own stuff, you can't see it like
That's
an
it.
external perspective. And the other thing I always say is to hire people that are smarter than you in their field of expertise. I mean, you wouldn't want to hire a lawyer that knows law less than you do. So it's the same
Right.
with your numbers and your bookkeeping, your accounting, and how you structure your business and all of that kind of stuff. You need expert guidance. So I guess this is the opportunity for you to tell us what you're doing and how people can connect with you.
Yeah. I'm also going to spin my secret sauce in here, and it's that I'm not an accountant by training. Um, and I think that's actually the thing that sets me aside, is I'm a chemist by training. I ran programs for the national labs here in the state with the Department of Energy for a few years. I was a teacher for a few years, and building systems that are data driven is my jam. So when I got mad at my CPA when they told me I should just pay more taxes and didn't tell me why, I fired them and learned how to do their job better than they did.
Yeah, brilliant.
And so my objective now is to take 7-figure contractors, talk to them in their language, plain language, no fancy accounting jargon, and tell them a story. Use my science skills to tell the story with inside the data, so they can make informed decisions and great strategies to get the results they want and stay on track to get there real time.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that scientific, that data-driven aspect is why you're distinct in the industry, I suppose, because a lot of accounting is more just purely the compliance aspect. It's not sort of forward-looking. It's telling us what's been, but it's not telling us what could be
That's it.
a lot of the time. So having someone with an understanding of that pragmatic approach of figuring out what the business could be in the future if a few adjustments are made is
That's
really
it.
helpful. Yeah, there's one other question I always like to ask, and it's what should have I asked you that I didn't? What's the question that's missing, and what's the answer to that question?
Ooh. How do you know how do you know what a contractor needs to take their business to the next level? And so we've talked about a lot of things today. We've talked about, types of jobs you take, the way you position yourself, a little bit about the finances, the money and the data. Um, but the question is, how do I know who I should call and when?
Yeah.
And especially because we're in the era now where people are being trained as bookkeepers in a weekend. They're given a crash course on how to use QuickBooks, not necessarily how to build great accounting systems and make sure that money's moving through your business seamlessly and in a predictable way.
Yeah. Yeah, I love
Um,
it.
and
Yeah.
and so here's my answer. If you're under your first 100,000, you probably don't need much of a bookkeeper. You need an invoicing software, separate business bank account, and that's it. As you start to cross that six-figure threshold, make your first 100K and work towards your first million, that's when you're going to want to bring on a contract bookkeeper. That's going to be able to help you just stay organized, take some of the higher level tasks off your plate. And at that point, you're probably going to be using a credit card to help you buy some materials too. Um, and so you're going to want to make sure that you have somebody doing the accounting the right way. And it's best to work with a professional. Make sure that, they have a couple of years experience, that they're skilled inside of, the area you're inside of. That means if there are bookkeepers that specialize in trades, I'm one of them. And as you continue to grow, then, probably your first 500,000, you should start to use some additional insights. So you should look for someone with a simple advisory offer where they can give you a lot of clarity from the reports they're generating.
Mm.
And then as you cross that seven-figure set, you've got a big beast to manage.
Mm.
And so when you hit that first million and you start working your way towards your first 10, that's when you're going to want to bring on somebody that can not only organize the records of the past, but help you paint the picture of the future in a way that makes sense to you. And for me, I like to think that I'm a great fit for the trades because I see how the model that their profits operate inside of their business, how money moves in and out, and how to write the story in a way that makes a lot of sense to them.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Dan. And how do listeners connect with you if they're curious to potentially work with you or even just to follow some of your material?
Absolutely. They can find me on Facebook and Instagram for Black Belt Ledgers. Usually it's a little bit shorter real content there. If they're interested in something a little bit more in depth, they can find my YouTube channel as well, Black Belt Ledgers. You can find it that way easily enough. Or if you want to jump on a call, see if you're a great fit to work together, I offer 2 60-minute profit leak inspections every month where we'll sit down and take an audit on your business from marketing all the way through the end of it and show you kind of where you're leaving money on the table and how much you can recuperate to get yourself back on track. And you can find that at blackbeltledgers.com.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'll tag all of those things in the show notes as well, so people can easily find it. But that sounds like a great offer to take up as well. So thanks so much, Dan. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks, Wes. I appreciate the time today.
Cheers.
Cheers.